Welcome, everyone, to my October 2024 webinar, Consciousness is All There Is, Wellness Based on Being. Wellness Based on Being is kind of my slogan, if you will, and I'm going to explain what all of that is about. Consciousness is All There is actually a book which just came out. Let's see if I can keep it in focus. There we are. That looks pretty good, by Dr. Tony Nader. I should have turned off the blur the background function, which always does strange things. But anyway, so it's a fairly lengthy book, very detailed about consciousness, how it manifests, and how, in a holistic view from the field of consciousness, that's all there is. All of manifest creation is just fluctuations of consciousness. It's like thoughts that we have, they come, they go. Consciousness remains. Consciousness is all there is. Okay, that's the webinar. It tells you everything we're going to discuss tonight, pretty much. Dr. Tony Nader, he's actually an MD and a PhD, very knowledgeable individual who has studied Maharishi's teachings and with Maharishi for decades. He has a profound understanding and obvious experience of what he's talking about. And so, in Maharishi's absence, having passed, I shouldn't say his absence because he left us many, many books and thousands of hours of recordings so that we have access to what he taught. As really the foremost scientist of consciousness, brought out an immense amount of knowledge about consciousness and how it works. And this book by Dr. Tony Nader really summarizes all of that teaching and makes it very clear. He presents it very simply, not too simply, but in a very clear manner that people can understand. The fundamental principle, which is the basis of all the healing work that I've learned, but which I learned through Maharishi's teaching, is that the quantum field of physics, the finest level of existence of the material universe, underlies our entire universe, the empty spaces and all the material parts of the universe. It's all the unified field of natural law, which the scientists call the quantum field. And the quantum field, it is discovered through the science of consciousness. That quantum field is awake, and it's conscious of itself, and maybe even more importantly, it's intelligent. Now, through the years, philosophers, particularly Western philosophers, who were not so much steeped in the Eastern traditions of transcending and the knowledge that's based on all of that, tended to look at the universe as a material thing and thought of mind and the content of mind as just a manifestation of the activity, basically, of the brain. It's all just physical stuff. And then we happen to have thoughts. And it's almost as if the thoughts were superfluous. That everything that mattered was the physical universe. But the science of consciousness finds that there is wakefulness. Sometimes it's very dull, and sometimes it's more awake, and sometimes it's awake in what we call higher states of consciousness, where there are degrees of awareness that go far beyond our normal conscious experience that we get through our senses and our thought processes and our feelings. And so wakefulness is the quality of being aware, being awake. This is not a political wokeness, but on the other hand, it has implications for that, because the opposite of woke is somnolent, sleepy. So, there is both that. But in the field of consciousness, we see that yes, there is sleep state of consciousness, dreaming state of consciousness, wakeful state of consciousness, a state we call transcendental consciousness, where we have transcended the whole thinking process and arrived at that field, at the field of pure wakefulness, consciousness. And that consciousness at that stage of not really manifesting anything, it's just awake, is awake to its own nature. It's what we call self-referral consciousness. Not only is consciousness awake to its own nature, but it expresses nature's intelligence. That field is not only awake, but it's intelligent. And this is an idea that is really utterly profound, but very foreign to Western thought, Western philosophical thought, and the common understanding. We don't see that our mind is necessarily in tune with the intelligence that we see in the universe, the intelligence that guides the motion of the planets and stars and the galaxies and, everything about us that makes us eat and, sleep and do all the things that we do. There is an intelligence that is expressed throughout all of creation, but we only get signs of it through what's manifest, through what happens. We see things and things happen. Things are always changing. There's always stuff going on, but we don't see the intelligence itself. We don't see the mechanics of how it operates. Now, scientists, of course, work out what we call laws of nature, things they can write on the blackboard or these days, whiteboard. And that's lovely. It's great to have that. But those laws of nature that we write on the blackboard, that's just, stuff that's scribbled on the board. The actual laws of nature are simply represented by those symbols. Those are not the actual laws of nature. So we experience the laws of nature in our normal waking state, but we don't actually get to see them. Now, consciousness, as I'm suggesting, knows itself. It seeks to know itself through its expressions in the universe, its many and varied expressions, including all things that are manifest, both living and non-living. Consciousness seeks to know itself. And this is one way to explain why consciousness manifests. Because consciousness, in a sense, could just be, right? It's all part of the universe. It's just there. But it actually seeks, if you will, it tries to understand itself, to know itself through all of its varied expressions, all kinds of expressions. We judge them, those expressions, as beautiful, ugly, good, bad, helpful, hindering. We make judgments about those expressions, but consciousness simply expresses. It tries to know itself by expressing. Now, consciousness, being conscious of itself is being. What is being? It's the self that is transcendental to all our experience, including our sense of identity. Now, we normally identify ourselves by the roles that we play. I'm a man, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, and so on and so forth. I'm a doctor, healer, and, I can list many things that, quote, I am. But those are all manifest properties. They are not the essence of me. And I have, a personality, I have feelings. We say, well, those are my feelings. Well, they are my feelings, but they're not me. And so in my work, as you're well aware, I think most of you have worked with me, we often use language that helps us see our experience from the perspective of our being present, we often say. And we define my presence is like being. It's who I am, being awake and awake to whatever is going on. And so all of my work is based on that. The self, then, being, is beyond any aspect of individuality, including our ego, our self sense. Being is transcendental to that. There's a Vedic expression, Tatvamasi, I am that, Tatvamasi. You say it kind of like one word, Tatvamasi. I am that transcendental being. And I was going to show you a photograph, but I forgot to get it ready. So we'll pass on that. It was a picture I took. I'll just describe it to you. It's a picture I took. There was some lightning, a storm, a rainbow, a double rainbow, actually. Beautiful, beautiful thing. So I went out and I just shot a series. You press the button and it takes a series of pictures. And I didn't even realize, because I was so focused on the camera, that there was a lightning flash while I was taking the picture, and it caught the picture. And it looks like an outline profile of a person, which up in the sky like that, made out of lightning with the rainbow, the rain and everything. You got the feeling like maybe we caught a picture of God. It was pretty amazing. So I have a copy of the picture. I was going to show you, but I'm sorry I didn't get it ready. It'll take me too long to get it out now. Manifestation from that field of being is called becoming. It's being, becoming. It's manifestation. Some people call it emergence, creativity. It comes from the field. Now we always use that language, from the field, but it never leaves the field. It's never anything other than the field vibrating within its own nature. So we have to be careful with our language, because it's not that I come out of the field. It's that I am the field. I am an expression of the field. I am the field vibrating in certain particular modes. And at every level of existence, subatomic particles, atoms, molecules, cells, tissues, organ systems, a body, all of that, every level of existence has its own rules, its own laws of nature, how things operate. And you can sometimes infer a little from one level to another. But, when you're looking at a gross body, you're not thinking in quantum mechanical terms, right? And so from the level of being, we can be in touch with that field and see the field manifesting at every level of expression of the universe, all the way out to the galaxies, galaxy clusters, and so on. A consciousness appears to create the universe, but the manifest universe, again, is nothing other than consciousness, the unified field, vibrating within its own nature. Now, I've dwelt on this at quite length, but it has a huge amount to do with well-being and my professional practice. Because when we understand that, then we shift our attention from, oh, I've got this problem here in my wrist or in my foot or wherever it may be, to the field is vibrating in a certain mode. And if I can change the mode of that vibration from that level of being, then my material body can heal. And so that's the direct connection. I call it a partnership for well-being, because I work with people. It's not that I work on people. I work with people from the level of being. So I write it as well-being with a capital BEING, to bring healing, transformation on the material level, and on the feeling level, and on the sense of self level, the ego level, all from the level of being, all from the level that's transcendent to all of our experience. And that work is about finding oneself, or one's being, the part that one identifies oneself as transcendental, and finding ourselves in what we might call the turbulence of the emergence of manifest creation. And we find that through transcending by going through all of those layers. And it's quite fun to do, actually. And it opens, because it opens us to subtler levels, until we get to that level of being, and the whole thing becomes integrated and balanced in that sense. So, in terms of manifestation through transcending, Maharishi's Transcendental Meditation TM-Sidhi program is the direct route to experiencing ourself being, and thus opening us to natural healing. And then we can, through our coherent attention, bring transformation, bring changes in the way that the field is expressing itself. So consciousness is being, emerging, manifesting. Meditation is manifest consciousness. We start with thinking, manifest consciousness, submerging. Ultimately, it's just the play and display of consciousness, the unified field of natural law, knowing itself, seeking to know itself, finding itself. Now, we use that language. That's another way we get this transcendence, and there are many ways of doing it. We use our language to bring our coherent attention to our conscious experience, so that the energies that comprise us can get untangled, if you will, balanced and integrated for our health, well-being, and spiritual evolution. All of that taking place when we use that language, and you've heard me use it, I'm sure everybody on the call has heard me use it, but some people may sign on to YouTube later, so I'll explain that. The language is simply, something inside me feels whatever it feels, and I'm here with it. The I is the witness of experience. Now, when we say that and we have no experience of transcending, we tend to say, well, it's me, it's mine, I'm it. I'm thinking, I'm observing it. But when we have the experience of transcending, that I is that unbounded level of being, that self within the field, observing how consciousness is creating and doing whatever it is that it's doing. And sometimes we want to change that. How do we know that the unified field is awake and intelligence? It's quite an assertion, but it's not through theory or conjecture that we know that, but rather it's that knowledge of the seers, people who have seen this reality, and through direct experience of this reality, that we know that the field is awake and intelligent. And that's a very profound thing. I was at a lecture that Dr. Nader gave, I think it was over a year ago, may have been 2 by now. And he posed that question, how do we know? And I thought, although I know he knew the answer, he didn't say it the way I want to say it here, that is to say it very directly, and that is, we know it through experience. Sorry, just canceling a call. We know it through experience. It is possible to know that consciousness is awake by being awake in the field of consciousness, and repeated diving into the field, repeated diving in, because at first, for most people, and it may be even the first experience may be fairly dramatic, but usually consciousness itself is kind of, shall we say, foggy. It's like being in a very thick fog. You can't really see much. That experience, when it's clear, is what we call unbounded. It's not limited by the boundaries. And the sense of one's being is that my existence goes beyond my skin. I'm not contained here in the skin. This body is a body, but I exist throughout the universe. And so experience can confirm that consciousness is this field. The field is awake. That's where we find it. And then the seers have left us written records. They've described what that experience is, or if we have the good fortune of actually knowing a seer, we may get to, sit at their feet, as we usually say it that way. We sit before them and listen to them lecture. But it's through the direct experience. And if a seer describes reality but can't give you the experience, doesn't have the tools, so to speak, so that you can experience that, it remains a lovely description. It's very nice, but it's just like theory or conjecture. It's just a story or a picture. It doesn't give us the experience. So we have to have techniques. So Maharishi's Transcendental meditation and TM-Sidhi program is a direct way, a very powerful direct way. Dive into the field. We like to say dive because we think of the material existence and our thoughts. That's the superficial level, and then we go more subtle, more subtle, more subtle. And so we feel like we're diving in. There's no pool, but you have that sense like that. I want to turn now for just a few minutes. I'd hope to get here faster, but I had a lot of material, it turns out, to some questions, which I took from Dr. Nader's book, Consciousness is All There Is. There, I got it to work. The first question is, do we truly have free will, or is everything determined? I described at the beginning of the lecture that from the material point of view, mind, thoughts, feelings, it's all just a consequence of the activity of the physical body, primarily the brain. And so from that point of view, everything is determined. There's a deterministic quality. Everything is set up and it runs automatically like a clock. You put the pieces of the clock together, wind it up, tighten up the spring, or put in a battery if it's that kind of clock, and it starts and then it just runs. And so that's a deterministic world. But we find that we have free will. We are conscious. There's a freedom in that consciousness. We can imagine things. We can create things. And when you really watch that process, you go like, where did that thought come from? Where did that wonderful idea come from? And as you have more experience with transcending, you go like, oh, I see. It's the field expressing itself. And more, that becomes automatic. And we have this wonderful situation of everything being easy because it just comes out of consciousness. So free will, this is a very short explanation. Free will is something we see that we have, but we also discovered that in ordinary waking state, we tend to mess up, at least sometimes. We make mistakes. We do things that hurt other people, even if not intentional. We don't always know what the best policy is for the meaning that is beneficial to oneself and everyone and everything in one's environment. So there is an opportunity to make mistakes. Where does that come from? It comes from the fluctuations, the creating, maintaining, and destroying aspect of consciousness itself. It seeks to know itself, it expresses, and then it releases it. Take the part that manifests like a wave, disappears. And a new wave comes, and a new wave comes, and a new wave comes. So it's always creating. And so there's an opportunity there to make mistakes. But when we are grounded in our own being, in our own self-referral consciousness, when we're settled in that state, then what we do, what we think and what we do appears to be life-supporting, appears to be mean. We see it operating that way. And it becomes ever more automatic, ever more automatic. We gain what Maharishi used to refer to as support of nature. And that evolves as our consciousness becomes clearer and clearer. Our experience of being becomes brighter and more real, more permanent in our awareness until it's all there is, that state of consciousness we call unity consciousness, where everything is being, everything is self-referral consciousness. When we get to that state, then that supportive nature becomes automatic. Maharishi called it automation in administration. It's just completely automatic. Do we have free will? We have the freedom to fully express. And there aren't really decisions because the sense of the expression of the intelligence of nature just guides us into what we should be doing, what nature is requiring of us. But to whatever degree our consciousness is shadowed, then yeah, we could make a decision to do something else. I'm very good at that. I tend to stay up too late. I shouldn't. I know I shouldn't because I need the rest. But so there's a little shadowing there. There's a little shadowing there. I don't do bad things. I just stay up a little late. But then we get to a more serious question. Why is there evil in the world? I'm pausing to let that soak in for a moment. What do we mean when we say evil in the world? Well, think about the people that we call evil. What does it mean? It's not just that they make mistakes and hurt other people, it's that they do it with intention. They make a decision to do something. They may be compelled to do it, but they have a degree of free will that they could not do it or do it, but they choose to do it because they get some gratification out of that. So why is there evil in the world? Because as consciousness tries to know itself, it manifests all this stuff. It creates, things emerge, they're maintained for a while, and then they disappear, then they are removed, destroyed. And in that process, there's the possibility of just latching on to whatever's manifest and, going with that instead of being self-referral. Now, that does not mean that people who are evil in that sense of doing things that hurt other people intentionally, it doesn't mean they're stupid intellectually. They may be very, very clever and have extraordinary abilities to recognize weakness in other people, vulnerability in other people, opportunities to manipulate other people. They may be very, very good at it, but there is a darkness there. There is a shadowing. We call it that. Those are words that we use to describe that those people don't seem to have a conscience. They don't seem to care about others. They care only about themselves. And, they're very selfish, self-centered, in the narrow sense of doing things for their benefit without any regard sometimes for other people's, well-being, whether it hurts other people. So we say, yes, there is evil in the world. And why? Because there can be, because in creating all of this manifest universe and all of this, peopleness, we have the possibility of hurting other people intentionally. Now, we say, well, animals hurt other animals intentionally. Yes, they do. Sometimes it's a personality thing, but usually it's for food. They're hurting other animals is usually their attempt to get food. But sometimes they're just bullies. And even in the animal kingdom, particularly if you look at a troop of monkeys, for instance, horses do the same thing. Dogs will do the same thing. There's a leader of the pack. There are followers. And then there are some that are, they have to have a pack, but they get beat up a lot. they get beat on. It's just a thing. In chickens, they call it a pecking order. And we use that word sometimes even amongst people, borrowed from the poultry industry, or farming, that, there's a pecking order. People are, some birds are at the top, or one bird usually, and then there's some kind of lieutenants, and then there are the flock, and then there's a bird that just gets beat up and often killed, or just, it just languishes because it just can't get what it needs from the flock. Pardon me. So the third question is, why do bad things happen to good people? And I think we ask this question a lot because we see that happening. Um, in the medical profession, there's a certain level of awareness or thought. I don't know that anybody ever really formally studied it, but you just get that impression when you're working in medicine that really nice people, what we call sweet people, get cancer, or at least the other way around. People who get cancer are often very sweet people. They're not always, by the way. Some of them are really mean, but or ornery, and so on, other qualities. But it's often very sweet people. And even in the field of pediatrics, many times the kids with cancer are just the nicest kids. And you go, like, why would it happen to this child? What kind of karma to take this beautiful child and make them go through this horrible process of, trying to fight this cancer? Anyway, free will and evil arise as a consequence of the interplay of the creative, maintaining, and destructive impulses of nature. It's just the way the system is. Choice, we say, do we have free will? Can we choose to do things that hurt other people? Choice, apparent free will, appears when we don't know what nature's intelligence wants us to do. I've kind of alluded to that already. We get to a fork in the road. We can go this way, we can go that way. If we're in tune with the impulses of nature, we don't answer that question on, well, I think I'll go right today. We just feel it. We feel that, oh, this is the way I'm supposed to go. Go that way. There's no real bind inside that says, oh, what if I go this way? What if I go that way? Oh my goodness, you know, I don't know which door the tiger is behind, right? Use that analogy if you know the story. It's like you're facing these doors and there's a tiger behind one of them, and I don't know which one it is. So if you're in tune with nature, then you'll do what nature requires. If nature needs to feed the tiger, sorry about that. But if nature needs you to go on to do something else, then you open a door that doesn't have a tiger behind it. Malice is a wonderful word because it describes that apparent free will. When we don't know what nature's intelligence wants, pardon me, that's the situation for choice. Malice appears in the harm that we inflict on others. It's the intention to cause suffering in others, or at least an utter disregard for others' well-being. So bad things happen because of several factors, actually. One of them is karma, we call it. It's the consequences of previous action. The fundamental understanding of karma is that everything we do sets out vibrations. And those vibrations come back to us at some later time, in this lifetime or in a future lifetime. But when it comes back to us, we say we have good karma and bad karma, meaning we enjoy it or we don't like it. It seems to bring us pleasure and prosperity and love and everything else, or it takes those things away and gives us great pain. So karma is a predominant factor. In the field of astrology, there are more malevolent planets than beneficent ones. So the consequence of that is everybody has some suffering in life. Everybody has some things happen that are not what you'd wish upon yourself. And then there are other things that happen of great joy. But karma is not the only factor that brings bad things. In some lifetimes, we have lessons to be learned. And indeed, that may be, so to speak, the purpose of an incarnation is to learn one or more lessons, life lessons. And so sometimes those lessons are, the process of learning them is very painful. It can be a real challenge, and we feel like we're suffering. And that suffering may go on for a very long time or even last a lifetime. And in my work, it's quite interesting sometimes to pick up that, what somebody is going through in this lifetime is coming from not karma in the strict sense of they did something that hurt other people and it's coming back to them. But it's like you have been granted this opportunity to learn this lesson. And, you may have found that you have had multiple opportunities. If you live long enough, you may find that you have multiple opportunities to learn the lesson. And the reason these things keep coming up is you haven't quite learned the lesson yet. So sometimes I have to help people find the lesson and see what it is they're supposed to take out of it so that they are more evolved people, more evolved in the sense that they have less obstruction in their nervous system. They're better able to reflect the intelligence of nature, trying to guide them. The third thing that I find are tests of faith. And for that, I always refer to the story of Job from the Bible, Job. The story of Job, basically a bet, a wager, so to speak, made between God and Satan. And fundamentally, God says there is at least one person on earth who will maintain the faith no matter what happens. And then he puts Job through all of these difficult situations. He loses his family and his land, his friends and everything else. And his life just completely falls apart and he's destitute. And then there's, in the story of Job in the Bible, there are long discussions of karma, the laws of karma, the rules of karma. And finally, Job still maintains his faith, but Job demands of God that God reward him. And so God basically says to him, "Who are you to make demands of me?" And he turns Job first, I think, into a behemoth, a monstrous land animal, and then he turns him into a Leviathan, a sea monster. And so he basically shows Job that he can do whatever he wants. And so it's an interesting piece from the Bible. It's I think the longest story in the Bible, and a really deep philosophical discussion. Anyway, suffering comes to us because of the binding influence of sensory experience. Pardon me. And that suffering can be overcome by contacting being, because consciousness is all there is. And when one's awareness is open to that experience, when one is in contact with being, it's clear that I'm not just this localized thing here in this body. I am an unbounded consciousness. I am consciousness, unbounded, and responding to everything in the universe and aware of those influences if you put your attention in that direction, and can work with those then to live not only a good life for myself, but for everybody I know and the whole environment. So that's the whole story in a nutshell of consciousness, all that there is, and how I work in partnership with people to enliven that being so that well-being can be created. So with that, that's the end of my presentation, and I've gone on a little longer than I usually do, a lot longer. And I'm happy if anybody has any question or comment right now, if you put it in the chat or in the questions. Let me just pop in here. Nothing there. Let me go over to chat. Repeat what I said about self-referral. Very good. In our normal activity, we are what we call object referral. Everything is based on how we perceive the world. And we have colored glasses. They may be rose-colored, they may be violet, they may be green, any other color. We have filters, if you were, on our experience. So we are object referral in that whatever is manifest in our life has an influence on us. And so we make decisions based on our best understanding and trying to avoid pain and seek pleasure and make sure that we're well fed and happy. Self-referral consciousness is that process. It's a dynamism that the knower, the presence, the being is awake to its own nature. So there's the knower, the knowing, and the process of knowing. And what is known is oneself in that state. It's being, it's who I am, that presence. And so it's self referral rather than object referral. It's not dependent on anything else. No matter what happens, it's still me. I'm still me. Now, in waking state, where we're object referral, if you say, well, it's me, then the question comes, well, who are you? Or who am I? If you make yourself self-referral like that, who am I? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know who it is. But when you're awake in self-referral consciousness, it's like, oh, it's being, it's that, not this character, not this body, this role, man, doctor, father, all of that. That's not it. It's being. And that being is unbounded. It's not trapped within the body or the world or the universe. It's just unbounded being. I hope that's a quick answer, but I encourage you to get the book. I do believe it's on Amazon. Dr. Tony Nader, Nader. Consciousness is all there is. It's explained very well. And of course, you can look at many of Maharishi's books. They tend to be extremely intellectual. If you're new to this, that may not be the first place to start. But there are many, 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 many books from Dr. Nader and others that explain this very thoroughly. But explanation only goes so far. You really have to live it. You have to experience it. It's on the basis of experience that we understand what self-referral consciousness is, and that it's all that there is. I hope that answers the question. I see no others at this point, so I'm going to end the recording. Our next webinar is planned for November the 12th, which is a very exciting day because it's a week after the election, the US elections. And for those of you that live in the United States or vote in the United States. So hopefully everything will have quieted down, or we may even help quiet it down. And maybe that will be the subject of the webinar, because I don't have a subject yet, but it may come to me. It was one of those things where I went like, okay, and what should I talk about next month? And it was like, there was no answer. It wasn't time to answer that question. So a comment has come in. It's, oh, this is a really good question. If the more conscious we are, the more we can create, then will we be able to shift trajectory of situations, weather patterns, or people, family members, or help them be more aware of nature's intelligence by our presence, being? And apparently they're writing another question. So I will answer that question now. We absolutely can shift the trajectory of situations like weather patterns. One of the first experiments that I did with the group of people who I was learning with at that time, it was a fairly large group, actually, a couple hundred of us, as I recall. And so people decided to play with the weather. And you can imagine that could create a little chaos, moving clouds around and, like that. And so people felt like they could do it, but Maharishi's comment, I think, put very gently, was it's not good to play with nature. Because if one's awareness was really established, then the inclination to play like that wouldn't be there. But in that more narrow focus with a little bit of more awareness than usual that one could play around. But that's working against the natural flow of nature's intelligence to create the weather that the whole environment there needs. And so, best not to fool with Mother Nature. He didn't say that. I said that. Can we influence family members? Well, we can definitely influence family members. And oftentimes we get that sense that without saying anything to them, we may not even be with them, meaning living in a different city or something or continent. Um, we're meditating and maybe have a little bit of intention from that coherent level that they should be healthy, they should be happy, they should be prosperous, they should be safe. Big thing right now, is kind of wishing for the safety of so many people. And just you have that intention and then you let go. You don't hold the intention. You just have that intention. Coherent awareness, you let go and you see what happens. And it may be that days, weeks, months later, you get a message, oh, there's this situation and it could have been so bad, an epidemic, some bug going through town. I was going to say epidemic, but it doesn't have to be a pandemic kind of thing, just a local thing. And, we were lucky. We didn't get sick. And you go like, oh, yeah, I was really, at that time, I was hoping, because I had heard that there was this thing going. And I just hoped that you would be well. But from that subtle level, the influence can be considerable. Now, can you help people be more aware of nature's intelligence? The answer is yes, but they may not be conscious of it. That is, it may not be conscious awareness. They're just more in tune with nature's intelligence. Because to understand that there is intelligence in nature, it takes both knowledge and experience. Otherwise, you have the experience, but you don't really understand what's going on. So you just ignore it. You don't think about it. But if you have some knowledge, then when you have the experience, you go, oh, I see, that's it. And one of the great joys I've had through my decades of practice of Maharishi programs is to have experiences along the way, right from the beginning, from my very first meditation, and then along the way, of new understanding through experience of things that I'd heard Maharishi say. And so I have the experience, and then, that's what he meant. That's what he meant. And so I hope in my descriptions tonight that I've said things that if you've had the experience or have it in the next few minutes here as we go into the group clearing session, which we need to do, that you go like, oh, now I understand what he meant by that. Okay, I don't see another question. So I'm going to end this here. Next webinar is going to be November 12th, again, second Tuesday, a week after the election. Easy to remember that way. Okay.